Sarah Campbell, International Planned Parenthood Federation. I work on the Caribbean program. I think my question is kind of answered by Kwame, but it really was around the fact that it's particularly difficult to change the ways of thinking and the ways of being of people over 40 and over 50. But I was wondering whether it was at all possible to begin to do that with at lower age levels, especially because Michael had suggested that when the schools were engaged with the work that you have been doing with the documentary. So I was wondering how that happened, or in what ways we could possibly engage the youth and the younger age levels.
All right, well, just two things. One is the Pulitzer Center has a gateway site that this is part of, which is part of the consortium of schools around the country that are engaging in the United States. The other thing I just wanted to say, to throw it out, because it's a little bit of a different spin, is it is my sense that there is a conversation in a hopeful way about being gay in Jamaica that's going on. Because when I got there, everybody's talking about it. The Prime Minister is addressing it. Members of Congress of Parliament are talking about it. Everybody you run into is talking about gay people and good or bad or whatever, but there is an enormous public conversation taking place. The conversation has begun. The question is, what direction does it go in? You just hear it everywhere. Parties, everybody's talking, and everybody's fascinated with gay life. This video was a bestseller. They're fascinated. Jamaicans are fascinated with gay people these days. And that cuts both ways. It goes to violence, but it also creates an opening of space for conversation for a more positive conversation to go on.
Thanks. Other questions?
Well, yeah.
Yes.
I'm Josh. I work with Kwame on the Pulitzer project.
Can you speak up a little bit?
I'm sorry. I'm Josh. I worked with Kwame and Pulitzer on the Love Project, but I actually want to address this to the panel as a whole, because something that I was always kind of struggling with is every time I go down there is this very conservative nature to it, right? And there is a taboo about talking about sexuality and talking about things sexually open, but at the same time, it's a highly sexualized society, like really highly sexualized. So how does that fit in, and why is that, and how can that kind of be used in a certain sense and a benefit to maybe open up the conversation? Sorry, that was a lot of conversation.
Look, it is what it is. That's what is odd and complicated and volatile and interesting about Jamaican society. That it is a highly sexualized society, but it's also a very conservative society. Even in the groups that are sort of not conservative, you think Rastas are sort of your hippies. They're not. Rastas are very conservative people, right? But sexuality is an interesting dynamic in the society where there are patterns of behavior that are filled with all kinds of, people would say, advanced thinking ways of how you deal with sexuality and so on. And at the same time, they are overshadowed by a kind of moral code that says, even though this is happening, we see it as wrong, but we are doing it anyway, or it's happening anyway. And there's this weird kind of contradiction. But I think what that leads to, though, is that, but there are some stringent kind of lines of behavior that people will say are expected. And you'll hear people say it. I mean, the parliamentarian Smith said exactly, he said, well, keep it to yourself. This is a classic Jamaican line. Just keep it to yourself. Don't bring it near me. You can do it, but don't bring it near me. And it's, but that's a threat, right? I mean, that is not just saying, you're free to enjoy your life. It says, when it says, don't bring it near me, who defines bringing it near me? That becomes the real question. And I think those are sort of vexing questions. But the answer has to be in a genuine kind of discussion about the foundations of those beliefs and those attitudes. And even if sometimes they feel as if they're bucking against sort of unmovable objects or walls, it is necessary for the church or for believers to sit down and say, what does this mean that we're looking at in our society? If we say we're believers and people are living with this kind of fear, can that make, this can't be a Christian society if we believe this is what Christianity is about. That kind of dialogue is necessary. Now, we won't get that encouragement to dialogue from one perspective that says, once you say you're Christian, then automatically everything you're going to say about gay issues is going to be a negative. So consequently, people, when others come up from outside and say it's the church, it's assumed automatically that that's what that all the church holds to that view. But the church has to have that conversation, right? And has to wrestle with that conversation and arrive at conclusions that would make you realize that what we see there in terms of the tyranny and the terror and the hatred that exists there cannot be acceptable. It just cannot be genuinely acceptable. So those conversations have to be happening in a similar way.
I'm gonna actually try and get a few more questions in, sorry, and then I encourage you all to stay at the reception and continue the conversations. Yes, in the back.
Sure. My name is Kent Condon with AMFAR, and I manage an initiative with Men Who Have Sex with Men and HIV. One of our regions is the Caribbean. And a couple of people said changing the law will not help. So I want to clarify that, because we're all talking about decriminalization.
Yeah.
But that is it won't help in itself, or don't focus on decriminalization. And the second question I have is about musicians. I heard a lot about journalism, but are folks working with musicians? Because young people, 12, 13-year-olds, they listen to musicians. So if we're going to reach them, that's something.
The changing the law in itself, so it would be helpful, but changing the law in itself isn't going to change the mindset of the people overnight. That's the point that I want you to come away with. The work with the musicians, we've been fortunate to have a company, Diageo, who owns Red Stripe, pull its support from 2 dancehall shows that are known to promote violent music. They have fought to work with us in terms of getting other companies to make similar kinds of moves, because it's unfortunately we have to hit people where it hurts, in your pocket. And so if there is some economic implication, then that's what will make the difference, really. So the work, we've tried to do some work with the musicians. They'll tell us, well, we're not inciting violence, we're just talking about what's going on in the society, So it's really tricky. So our work really is on the other end, trying to get the people who support them, get their producers to change, to not put something out, and we're getting there. Thankfully, the Broadcasting Commission put a ban on a piece. You talk about a highly sexualized society. They put out what I think is a very good piece. It was not aggressive. It actually spoke about the power play between man and woman, and actually the woman not being submissive in this case, and her demanding it in a certain way. The challenge was that it's not really fit for airplay, because all the school kids are singing it, So we've made some steps forward in terms of banning violent lyrics. I mean, now you can't even play a song and beep it, bleep out, the part that says gun or whatever. Anything that's suggestive, it cannot be played on the air. And so there have been some strides made in that regard.
I would just, we only have time for one more question. I just would add one thing about decriminalization. While you've heard the opinions of a couple of people on this panel, make no mistake, there's a lot of organizing going on in the Caribbean about litigation strategies. What possibilities are there? It's really, as you heard, because of the sensitivities. It wouldn't be appropriate to discuss the details here, but there's a lot of organizing going on both at the international and the domestic level, and that's very, very new. And I know that AMFAR plays a role in supporting some of it. Last question.
My name is stand up, okay. My name is Valita Prendergast, and I work for American Jewish World Service. And my question was more for Jason, but of course anyone else can answer. But I heard you mention earlier that you started some groundwork with local churches. And what has that experience been like? Because I find that religion plays a lot to do with sort of the stigma about homosexual behavior in Jamaica. So if you could talk a little bit about that.
Sure. We've managed to get them to come out and say, stop the violence. You know, don't beat them and kill them. They may be sinners, but don't beat them and kill them. So we've really been trying to work with those who are willing to come forward and speak, to encourage the others. And so different denominations have come forward, and particularly since the Gene Robinson fiasco with the Anglican Church, there has been dialogue about certainly the right for gay people to be accepted in the church, but of course you have to be asexual and all kinds of other things. It's crazy. But so we've again made some headway with the church that don't beat them and kill them. They may be sinners, leave them alone.
Thanks. And I would like to give 30 seconds to Rachel because I understand there have been some developments today about the HIV travel ban here in the U.S., which is also relevant to this issue. So because I know that probably a lot of you in the audience are interested in this, tell us what's up and then we'll...
So as I think many of you know, in the summer of 2008, the U.S. Congress finally repealed the statutory ban on entry to the United States by people with HIV or AIDS. It had been in effect for 22 years. This summer, finally, we got regulations implementing the repeal. The regulations look good. The public notice and comment period closed in August. The administration has told us that the final regs will be issued by the end of this year. Today we got a memo from U.S. Citizenship and Immigration Services saying that they will hold in abeyance any green card adjudications that are currently pending for people who are HIV positive and don't have access to to a waiver under the current waiver system. This was something that we, Immigration Equality, and other organizations like Gay Men's Health Crisis and others that were engaged in this issue, asked USCIS to do, pointing out that it was really a waste of resources to deny people when we would only motion to reopen the cases once the final rule is issued. So good news for people who have pending claims.
Thanks, Rachel. So before John comes up, I want to thank all of you for being with us. It's incredibly heartening that all of you came out. I know it's a really busy time in New York City, and if you're a journalist, if you're an artist, if you're an activist, you're a donor, I think you heard today a lot of opportunities to get involved in this issue, which is very underexplored, and I encourage you all to get involved. So thank you.
Thank you, Julia, and thank you all of you. I said at the beginning that the Pulitzer Center is about multiple voices, about encouraging conversation on some of the most important issues that we face in the world today, and what a rich conversation we just had. And I'm excited about the fact that this now will become part of our continuing conversation about this. We'll take the edited version of this, we'll put it up on our website. We wanted to take just a moment to show you the Glass Closet, which is the web portal that we're launching today in conjunction with the World Focus series that's beginning tonight. You'll see that we already have up on it the piece from the Atlantic this morning, the Global Post piece on the Underground Gay Church that Micah wrote, also that went live this morning. We will put up the video, the excerpts from this event. Also on here you can see that there's a link back to Live, Hope, Love. You heard, in terms of multiple voices, what Micah talked about, the experiences that he had, that is an important part of the reality in Jamaica. And so is the experiences and the encounters that Kwame had that are captured so eloquently in Live, Hope, Love, the human face of HIV/AIDS. And we think that as people become exposed to that, it makes it very hard to sustain the caricatures, the stereotypes that we all carry in our heads and break through that. Kwame said something else that I think is terribly important about trust, that some of the work that Micah did to get to these deep, sensitive issues of homophobia, stigma, were only possible because some of the people, the interlocutors that Micah encountered had already had the experience of working with Kwame on this project for a year, 18 months at that point. And this is again is about what we try to do we see the journalism as a campaign of issue awareness, and it has to continue. It can't be about just a piece on World Focus or NewsHour or whatever it is, or one piece of writing. It has to be ways you have to keep thinking about how do you take people to the next level? How do you sustain the conversation? We hope that Glass Closet will be the next phase. That this project is not completing with the end of the videos that Micah has produced for World Focus. It's beginning. So that your story is part of this. It already includes some of the voices of the individuals who are featured in that reporting, but it's a YouTube-based platform that anybody can put up their points of view. They can do a webcam. You just you post it to YouTube, and eventually this map will be populated. We've done similar things with our water and food reporting. We're about to launch one on climate change, but it's about a global conversation, and these icons, these little flags will pop up around the world, and you can enter the discussion. You can put up your own view. You can talk, and believe me, this is not an issue that is limited to Jamaica alone. We think that they're posed in a way in Jamaica that is stark enough that we hope it will prompt this kind of general conversation about what we're dealing with in all of our communities, our churches, our schools, and so on. So with that, I don't want to stand in the way of food and drink and conversation among all of us, but as we're having during the reception, Natalie is going to put up the excerpts from the performance at the National Black Theater Festival of Live, Hope, Love. And on our regular website, pulitzercenter.org, you'll see it's about a 10-minute excerpt of this 70 or 75-minute piece. And it is in my humble view, a spectacular work that captures so much of what Jamaica is dealing with. And so I hope you'll come back to the site, listen to it. We'll be playing it as we're chatting, but come back to the site, put your own voices up on the Glass Closet, and help us keep this conversation going. So thank you all for being here. Now let's just remind me, the first song on this is This is what Kwame was talking about earlier, that came from his experience growing up, the story of Greenberg.